Welcome back. Another wonderful day of Lightroom. This is actually Lightroom Classic. So if you are looking for the Lightroom full, or not full version, but the current version, let me just pull that up right now. Yeah, skip that. In your Adobe software, you're going to have Lightroom Classic and Lightroom. I'm on this one right now. I'm going to be making videos for Lightroom later on, but just make sure you're on the correct one. This is technically the I'd say the professional version because it's been used for a lot longer, and people just prefer what they're used to and what their workflow helps out with. So that's why I'm on this one right now, and also my students are using this because it's just better for me to know what they're doing because I'm actually more familiar with the Lightroom Classic. They both do exactly the same things. It's just a different way of looking at the program. So today we're going to do a little thing that everybody really needs to get the hang of. It's a great kind of skill to learn, especially within Lightroom, because it's meant to be quick, meant to be easy, and it's meant to be for every photo, really. I mean, anything you do, if you're doing it professionally or even just for fun, if you want to bring those photos out and make them pop, make the colors more vibrant, make the focal point your subject in the photo, which in this photo would be her, make her pop out of the screen a little bit more so that it catches the eye, then this is where you should be in this tutorial. The first thing you should do is in Lightroom, you are going to be importing. So it's right on the, you can't see for me, it's the file on the top of your screen there, file, edit, develop, and so on. Under file, you have import and export. You're going to be importing photos. It's going to open up a screen, and all you have to do is really what I do is just open up your folder, and you are going to drag that into the import section. It should be automatic. And what it does is actually shows every other photo inside that folder that you imported from. And then you just check it, uncheck it. And on the bottom right-hand side, it'll just say import down here. I'm not going to go there right now because it's in the previous video. Let's just get right into it. This is going to be a sort of update on this photo, which is the same exact photo as the very first video I did in this new series for Lightroom. So this photo I got from pexels.com. The name is right there. It's www.pexels.com. And it's a free website that you can just make an account for, and you can get copyright-free images that anybody can really upload. So you can actually upload your own images and make an account, and people will use them if they like them. So this photo is it's a well-composed photo, and I'll show you why in a bit. But one thing I'm not a fan of is how washed out it looks. And this is the default view for the photo. So when you download it, it should look exactly like this. That's the actual photo title on pexels.com. I don't know how to search for it exactly, but you can probably find it pretty quick. But this is what we're going to kind of update. A great photo, I'm not denying that at all. What I want to do is make it pop a bit and show you a couple techniques inside Lightroom that will make everything a lot easier for you. So when you open up Lightroom and you import stuff, you'll be in the library tab first. It looks kind of similar, but the toolbars on the right-hand side, the functions, are not there. What you can do as a shortcut, and this is also later in a future video, is make your own presets, so saved presets. Let me just pull my window over a bit so it pops up in the right direction for you. So under this, you have, these are all the default presets, and we have all these different things. You can make your own, and you can save your own presets, and then you can just use them and use them and use them, and you can make presets for different types of photos, exterior photos, interior photos, different lighting presets, and so on. That's that. If that's a quick way you want to do it, that's great. We're going to go into the actual finicky business here and work in the Develop tab, which gives us all the tools on the right-hand side. So make sure that's clicked. If you have the exact same photo from pexels.com, then great. If not, don't worry. You'll just kind of adjust things a bit differently. You'll use the same tools because it's all the same in the end. There's presets also here on the left-hand side. They disappear under library. It changes here, but basically they're both the same. It's just Develop tab is more tools, more finicky, more professional, I guess you'd say, than the other one. People can say whatever they want about it back and forth, but that's just the way it's laid out. Now, on your tools, you might have this all closed off. Just make sure the basic is opened up. This is the first thing you should be working with. We have tools up here as well, which we'll touch on a little bit. We'll be using this tool right here, which just causes another layer, and we create a new layer with different presets on top of that. But here we go. So everything you do is going to affect this photo right now because nothing is happening but the default photo. I'm going to put some quick keyboard shortcuts in the description below. You can also see them right here. So if I push L, and you can push L as well on your keyboard if you're in Lightroom, let me click it. If you push L, it'll go what's called lights out mode, and this is going to show you the entire photo with just a black background. You can also go full screen, which is a different shortcut. It does pretty much the same thing, but this is just a quick way of looking at the photo at the exact same scale you have it instead of scaling up. So that's one thing we'll be doing a lot. The other one we'll be doing is you'll be hitting the sort of backspace button, usually above enter or return, and that shows the before and after. Now why it changes for me is only because I put a preset on just before by default by accident, just to mess around a bit. So the before is just another type of preset, so just ignore that right now. But you can see the original photo by clicking that, and then all your changes will go back and forth with the backslash buttons. We'll be using that quite a bit. So all these things will be in the description below this video. If you're not on YouTube, I don't know where they'll be, but that's on YouTube on the channel. Also, subscribe because I'm making more and more videos as we go along here. I'm getting back into the flow of things, and it helps having more people watching to get ideas and things to work on and new video ideas for the future. So here we go. First thing you want to do is look at your photo. This photo's kind of washed out, so it's kind of, I wouldn't say the white balance is off. It sort of is. It's not for stuff like this, but it's kind of washed out. So I want to sort of bring that down a bit. And a few ways you can do that. One is adjusting the temperature of the entire photo. So if you drag this around, you can see things change. But it's not what I want right now because it's not giving me any effects I want. I don't want this where everyone looks like they have jaundice. Even the chickens have jaundice. But double click the name, it'll go back to the default tint. Let's mess around with this. You can see things are changing here. But what we're going to do is work on just these effects right here, the tones. There's an auto tone button. If I click this, it does that to the photo, which also kind of goes more in the blue range. I don't want that. I'm going to go Command Z and it will go back. We want to change the contrast. I want to bring the contrast out just a bit. Let's go plus 14 for now. And the whites, I'm going to bring them down a bit. And I'm going to bring the blacks down a bit as well. Now this is not changing the color range of the photo. It's still got that bluish tint. But if you look at this, if I bring the whites up, I think it's a bit too much. Why? Because when I look at the photo, let's go before. Oh man, before is really messing me up. It's not going to work for me today. Before it was pretty washed out. So the white is already pretty prevalent. So I actually need less white. If your photo is looking darker, if it's looking kind of like this, you'll want to bring the whites out as well as the blacks. So just look at your photo and you're going to adjust depending. So the whites will come down and the blacks, which is the shadows and the darker ranges, are going to come up. And that is, I'd say, pretty good for me. Yours might not be the same. It's up to you. Now the highlights, this you can see it's changing the lighting in the background, the very bright stuff. Let's bring that back. In the shadows, I don't need that right now. I can leave it as is. Going back down here. This is not going to be a big change. This is just some subtle things that are really good techniques to learn. The presence, the texture is going to be the detail in here. So if I zoom in here to her face and I put the texture up, you can see that those edges around, let's say her wrinkles, her lips, her teeth, even the color changes, the texture change is going to make those edges very, very prevalent. I actually don't want that. I'm going to pull it down just a few percentages. The clarity, crank that up. It's kind of similar, but it's more, I'd say, on the brightness scale of things, but it still adds more sharp edges. I don't need that. Let's zoom out. Just click and click. That's all I do. Click to zoom in, click to zoom out. The dehaze, if you look, it's actually changing the color a bit. And this is kind of affecting that first issue I had where it's kind of washed out. What I want to do is actually dehaze it a bit. So let's pull this up just a bit. Let's go about 15. Type that in, 15, enter, and I'm good. So it's not as if her wrinkles and everything are popping up, but she's kind of getting a little bit of that drawing effect. So what I might want to do is reset the texture, bring the dehaze down a little bit more. Now, even less than before. I don't want her to look like those, I don't know what they're called, the photos that look kind of drawn. They don't look fully drawn out like an actual pencil and pen and color. I mean, they just look slightly drawn. The edges are what pop out more than anything else. And that is what I don't want right now. The vibrance, this is going to be color changes. If you're looking, it's bringing out all the vibrance. We're not going to touch this because we want to actually change certain colors vibrance. So let's pull that back to default. If we pull it down a little bit, it's going to go grayed out, grayscale. Saturation is the amount of difference between colors. There's other ways to explain it, but that's how I explain it. It's just to wrap your head around these concepts, right? Vibrance is how bright those colors are, and saturation is the distance between the colors. So it kind of takes the ends and it expands those ranges out, and then the colors will have more sort of in the way you're looking at it, distance between them, so they kind of pop, but they're not bright. They're not brighter. The vibrance I might want to pull up just a bit. Okay, that's good for now. I can change more later on. Don't go like one really quick hint here, and it's really important too, is don't go crazy right away. You're going to adjust a whole bunch of stuff, then come back and adjust the things that are working, and you'll find that your workflow will be a lot faster, and you're not going to have to fix a lot of things. Small movements are better to start, definitely with the beginning parts of your editing. The tone curve, right now we're on the whites and the dark, so it's basically just lighting. I don't want this to change at all. I want to double click that, it goes back to normal. What I do want though is the whole photo has this blue tone to it, and that might be the camera, it might be the lens. If I click the blue button here, there's red, blue, green, right? The primary colors. There's the blue side. I can really just crank it up. I can add other dots, and I can crank the high end of the blue up. Now that really messes up. Get rid of that. Double click, double click. I'm going to go right in the middle to start and pull it down just a bit, because again, jaundice. If you don't know what jaundice is, just have a look. Everything goes yellow for your skin. Pull that down just a little bit. Now, where is the blue happening the most? It's not in the white area, the light area. It's the darker areas. So now that I have the middle, that's kind of a pivot point. I can now just add a dot to the darker and pull it down. And what that is doing is it's not affecting the lighter areas as much. There's still a little bit of a curve to it because of the way that this graph works. But because that middle pivot is there, I can now pull this down just a bit, and that is a lot better. That before, man, this is exaggerated blue. So just kind of use your imagination, but you can see that just the clarity is so much better already. It's not as washed out, and it's not as blue, because we're not living in some new planet where the sun, our star, is a blue star and everything has this blue tint. That's what it would look like. It was like this, maybe worse, who knows. Now this looks real, and I didn't do very much. All I did was change a few different things. I adjusted not even the colors necessarily. The biggest adjustments were in the shadings, so the whites and darks and the contrast between them, just a slight contrast. And then we had a little bit of color expansion, so pulling those colors, the range out just a tiny bit. And really, I mean, honestly, you can say you're done. Let's go lights out. That photo already looks amazing. It looks much better. Next, we have other things down here. Most of the things we won't look at, but we will be going to the HSL color. My voice is raspy again. It's September right now, and I'm kind of back into teaching mode, especially because it's COVID and we've been off for quite a while. So my voice is not used to talking so much. I'm used to just sitting alone and doing my own work silently, which I think most of you do. Kind of miss that right now. So here's the thing. I still don't want as much blue, but I do not want her or the skin tones to go again more yellow. Because when you pull away the blue, you're going to typically get more yellow. Not always, but that's kind of a typical rule, and a good way to look at it is that chart right there. There's a reason why it's colored like that. So let's go down to the blue area. There's aqua and blue. These are on the sort of blue scales. Aqua's between green. It's all in order. It's in order for the rainbow, really, if you want to think about it. The aqua, I'm not going to change the hue, right, because everything's changing. If you look, it selects just those colors. So this basket, this over here, they're changing colors. I might pull it up just a tiny bit, but the saturation is what I want to pull down a bit. And then the luminance, I'm going to pull down that a bit as well. Too much, it becomes like it's a cutout part. You want to just touch it a tiny bit, because small adjustments are much better. Let's try the other blue. Pull the saturation all the way down just to see, and it affects everything. But what I want is just a tiny bit, and the luminance, that becomes too washed out. A little bit darker like that. That's fine. Don't worry if you're kind of going in the opposite direction of where you think it should be, because when you adjust other things, let's say I want to pull out some of the reds, I can go up to the reds and I can adjust those a bit, and things will start popping in other ways. So this panel can be quite frustrating sometimes. Just remember, you can always double click and bring it back. What is the reset? Let me look this up quickly. The reset everything. It's in the list below. I forget, but it resets all your functions here, all your little tools. So if you push that, just be wary you're losing a lot. The oranges, I actually want to change the orange a bit. That's a bit more smooth. And the reason why I'm thinking of the fluency of the photo and the way that things flow in, because the stuff back here has this golden hue. There's this golden hue here, her bracelet. Even her skin tone kind of collects that color and pulls it down. And then the dead chickens, they are, well, typically not as yellow in real life, but I can still add a little bit of that golden hue to this color. So what I do, so gold is more the orange range. What I would do is increase the yellows just a bit, just to bring, let's just crank it. Nothing really happens. So what's happening here is that's not registering as yellow, so it's not being affected. Let's see what happens if I increase these. There it is. So I guess the orange is affecting the chicken, so that Lightroom is thinking that this is an oranger color. That's why it's changing those. Sometimes you just gotta mess around and see what happens. No, it's, if I pull it up too much, like you see the reflections. That's what I mean by the fluency in the colors, how it kind of flows, even her skin tone. So that reflection was part of that. But I don't want that. Let's bring the hue. No, it's not. I use the jaundice joke quite often. I think that's good where we are. Let's just leave that. Now, how about some lovely magenta? I know that this is here. It's going to pop if I really crank it, right? But I don't want too much. Just slight changes. Maybe if I go back and just leave it all to default, it might even be better right now. I could have messed it up a bit. Happens all the time. Okay, the detail, forget about that. Lens correction is a great thing to have. I use this almost every single time. And there's two big things here. There is this gradient and this gradient. And this is how much it affects each one. So we have the first one, which is these two factors. So what you're doing is you're increasing the amount just to mess around. And then you're pulling these in different directions. So if bottom one is it affecting both, but I can actually split them. And if you look at the photo, look at the red down here, because this is blues, kind of pinks and magentas over to reds and a little bit of orange, but it's kind of changing that. So what I do want, and here's where you have composition stuff. We have these bright oranges and reds over here, and we have this thing which could be a bit brighter. Now, on the whole scale, I'm going to pull that blue and leave that where it is. I'm going to just ever so slightly. If I turn it off again, you can look. That's all that is happening. bottom one, let's crank that up. Nothing much happens. Let's expand it. Nothing much is happening. This is all dependent on the photo. So it doesn't really matter what I do. Vignette, forget about that. Distortion, this is obvious what it does. Okay, so let's say I'm not happy with this right now, but let's say I am happy with this. What you would probably do next is go up here to the main adjustment here, and we can adjust this. And if you look, it's holding things back and forth. You can pull the middle area and brighten things up. This is kind of a whole spectrum, but some people like to do this first. I actually like to do it second. It's just a preference. It's kind of like being an artist. You have your own workflow, your own ways of doing it. So whether or not you agree with everything I'm doing here, let's brighten that up. Just, that's too much. There we go. I think that's pretty good. That's a lot better. I think the brightness changed it a lot. Yeah, your workflow can change. The next thing is we are going to work on this tool here, and there's a shortcut. You can see it Shift M, but what it does is we are going to draw a sort of an oval. Doesn't matter where you draw it, you just move it, and we're going to put it on her. Now, you can't really draw around her exactly, and I like that you can't in this program, unlike Photoshop. The reason being is that if I cut her out basically and change her her settings personally, because it'd be cut out exactly, you'd get this sort of actual cut and paste look. You can mitigate that with some feathering, but it's not the same. And this is why I like Lightroom for this a little bit more, depending on your scenario, because there's this bleed where this oval is going to affect everything in the oval from the middle out as a feather, so it's harsher here and less harsh on the edge. So what I can do is it actually affects the area around her, so it's kind of like a glow. But this is where you have to be careful at the same time. And the reason being is that if you crank it up, it will be way too obvious, as if she's, you know, an angel descending from heaven, whatever that look would be. Let me give you an example. So here's this button here, invert, right? That's just too much. It's way exaggerated. So even when I said small movements is better, here the smallest movements are the best. I think you might have to click the invert button. The feathering is, let me show you the feathering with an exaggeration. Best exposure. Okay, it's brighter in the middle and not so much in the end. If I pull this down, it goes all the way to the very edge. It's very harsh. You really want a feathering. Default is 50%. You can increase it a lot. If you increase it a lot and shrink it, as an example, you can just do the face, which is kind of standard practice. For this photo, I actually want everything around her. I might do a second one for the face, but I want her full body to be adjusted ever so slightly. Just like that. I'm going to pull it up so that it's more towards her face versus more towards her body. Let's pull it up right there. And that's good. Okay. Reset. So here we go. Let's zoom in. I think it's Command plus or Control plus. Highlights. Just ever so slightly. Shadows, I'm going to pull those down a bit. Crank them all the way down. Her hair becomes a little bit too dark. There's always reflection, but I want a little bit of a contrast, more contrast in the rest of the photo from the whites and the blacks. There we go. Let's go 12. Blacks, increase it. Too much. We want to go the opposite direction. Typically, you're going to pull them apart, right? The lights and the darks are going to pull them apart. If I crank it, it's way too much. So let's go -10. And then that before. I don't know how to fix that, to be honest. Because I did that first preset, it really messed things up. I can't show you the original photo right now for some reason. Okay, you can probably do it yourself. texture. Again, remember texture, it brings out the edges, and especially on creases and wrinkles and eyes and teeth, it just cranks out that definition. I don't want that. I'm going to actually go right back to 0. Dehaze, opposite direction, and clarity. No, let's leave that where it is. So you see, I didn't really do very much. Now what I do want to do is add a little bit of purple to her. No. Let's go 11 is fine. And just the reasoning, my thinking is, I have these other colors happening and I want to kind of help them flow a bit. And I don't mean flow where you can see purple. I mean like a subconscious kind of flow where you don't notice it, but your brain will, because your brain will see all the colors for what it really is. Just a subconscious flow. Somebody's mentioned on these videos, I'm sounding like, who's the painter? Bob Ross. Just the flow. That kind of stuff. So saturation, again, this is the color distance and color vibrance. I don't need very much. Sharpness, crank it. Nothing really changes. Noise, I never like noise. Defringe is interesting, but we don't need that right now. I think, honestly, this is pretty good the way it is. Okay, now the tool, just click it again and it stops. It's still there. Click the tools and this will pop up, right? You can click it and adjust, click somewhere else, if you have another tool it is, or click the tool itself and it stops again. So you can see that it's still there. And just to show you the differences, I pull this away and I pull it back. It's just that ever so slight brightness, that vibrance, no, not vibrance, the just the pop that happens. And it's so subtle that you don't really notice it. Because if you look at the photo without knowing this kind of stuff, you'll say, wow, she's obviously the focal point of this image. And it's obviously, well, the photo is taken really well because there's a little bit of extra lighting here. Like they must have had a separate lighting rig just looking at her. No, it's just the slightest movements that make the biggest difference, especially in this program. It really adds that professionalism. Let's say I'm happy with this right now. I'd probably go through another pass and adjust more things, especially after I added that extra layer of just her. But you can do that on your own. You just, really, it's not that difficult. It's just about going through and moving slightly. What I will talk about is this tool right here, the cropping tool. And this is an important thing with your photographs, where we have what's called the rule of the 2/3 rule, or the rule of thirds. What else do they call it? Let's just stop right there. I can't think of it right now. But when you push that button, it's called the crop tool, I'm pretty sure. Crop overlay. R is the shortcut. What it shows you is a grid, and that grid has 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So it's thirds. 1, 2, 3. Now the rule of 2/3, or the rule of thirds, is whatever you're photographing, or you're looking at, or even you're taking someone else's photo and you're adjusting it, you want to make sure that whatever the focal point is, the subject in the photo, that they are either 2/3 of the photo or they are 1/3 of the photo, back and forth. It doesn't matter what you choose necessarily. Depends on the photo, obviously. But what it matters is where the thirds are. And you have choices. You can go this section here where she is, because her arm comes out here. She's kind of in a 2/3 photo. If I did this and I shrunk it and I pulled her over even more, pulled her over to the edge, now she would technically be 1/3, because it's only this section. This is now put in the trash. And this section, the 2/3 section, is now the excess stuff, the background, or the extras in the photo. So you have a choice, 1/3 or 2/3. And really, I'd actually pull this back a bit and make it more of a square, maybe a 1 by 1 photo. You can see it right here, the example. there's the full, which is kind of nice. I mean, what if I did this? Pull that back. I can't do that. Pull this side back and make her more of a centerpiece. Then she becomes more of a 1/3 versus 2/3. And this is totally fine as well. The rule is not set in stone. You don't have to change it. You can also do this, bring it up, where she, actually I'm going to bring it down, just the way it's working. Now she is in, now she's 1/3, but also, let's bring it down even more. She is more 1/3 on all sides, sort of. You get the idea where it's not just horizontal, it's also vertical thirds. You can adjust things, you can change it around. What I would do for this photo is, where's my, I keep forgetting these things. Where's the crop? Adjustments, crop. Oh yeah, okay, so here's an important thing. If I want you to push the O button on your keyboard, and what you're seeing now are different cropping alignments. Now this is not saying you're going to pull into, right, a spiral or these grids, these different grids. You're not going to pull in just this one section. All this is helping with is alignment. So even though it says the cropping tool, this is actually a helpful guide for aligning your photos to make them more artistic, more fluent, better to the eye, right? You can do this, and you can still use, this is a different type of rule, but you can use this kind of stuff, and you're following these lines. One of my favorites is actually the Fibonacci sequence. So you can see that this line and this line are intersecting. I honestly don't know much about this one myself. Someone else can probably help you more, but you can just mess around and see what you like. These are just for aligning. There it is, Fibonacci. Okay, so this is the sort of infinite growth of the Fibonacci. I forget the actual number. What we're going to do is we are going to pull this up and down, and I'm going to try and put her in just as stereotypical as you want. This is kind of elementary level stuff with Fibonacci. But if you look, right, what you want to think of this as is wherever your focal point is should either be on or off the spiral. So let's say my focal point starting with her. Let's go right on the nose. There's that lovely pun. And then we pull it, it just follows her around, and even the flow of this follows her over to her guiding hand, which is doing the action of cutting the chickens. Now, I kind of wish I had more chicken in there. I'd pull that down a bit. And if you look over here, right, now you see it kind of makes more sense. And then you have all this open space over here. You have her kind of looking into the open space. You can go on for days about photo composition. Well, I won't. But you're just getting the idea. I'm going to Command Z and go back. Let's see. Nope. How far do you have to go back here? Is that it? Undo crop, undo crop. There's a better way to do this. I just don't have it right now. Every single time I move that silly crop. There we go. Okay. Command Shift Z goes forward. Redo. There we go. Now we're back at the beginning when I first showed you the crop tool. So just hit O. You go all these different options. This is the default one. It's the best one, to be honest. And that's really it. The last thing I'm going to show you is finding the angle of the photo. And this is, you can adjust it, right? And it will adjust its crop to fit within their photo. So you don't have to change anything. But what you really want to do is make sure the photo's aligned, especially for let's say landscape photos. You have a bunch of a lake with some mountains behind it, right? If that mountain line of the lake meeting the mountain is not straight across the photo, you can use these lines here. You can adjust it so that the photo is straight, and then adjust the angle here so that that line, that lake meeting the mountain as an example, is exactly straight. It's really important. It makes the biggest difference. And if you're ever going to want to do anything professional with this, you would be picked apart right away if that is not already straight. So just be wary of that. And that's pretty good the way it is. So let's save this, and it's not going to save a new photo. It's going to save the metadata up here on the left. We'll look up here, metadata. So it's kind of Lightroom attaching another layer on top of the original. So the original photo is not changed. In my folder here, it's still washed out. Let's actually pull this up, because my before and after is not really working. You can still see it's pretty white and washed out, and now a lot more vibrant, it's a lot more clear. It looks more natural. Next step you would want to do is export, and all you have to do is go File, Export, and you can follow the steps here. Export for whatever you like. So you go to your file format's important. I typically export to Photoshop and maybe do something further later on. This is great because you can actually edit the photo in Photoshop after you have adjusted the coloring. And then you can export to JPEG itself, etc., just file settings. And you choose the location, right, where it is, make a subfolder, and so on. You can figure this out on your own, rename it, whatever you want. That's how you save the photo, because when you push Command S, it doesn't actually save what you've done as a photo. It saves it as metadata, as a sort of attachment file in Lightroom. So make sure you export to actually see your work. Otherwise, you're just going to be looking at the original washed out photo. So I think that's good for today. I want to thank you for watching. Please subscribe. It's really important. And also leave a comment below about what you'd like to see, what you want to learn about. Maybe you want me to explain a single tool in a bit more detail. Just let me know below or send me a message and I will do my best with that. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.